Israel's military says that it has entered the first stages of its planned assault on Gaza City, that it has had skirmishes, with Hamas fighters on the outskirts of the city. The development comes just hours after Israel's defense minister approved a deployment plan to take over the area. The plan sees some extra 60,000 reservists being called up for the operation. Human rights groups warn the offensive will worsen an already dire humanitarian crisis as it takes place in some of Gaza's most densely populated areas. Palestinians in Gaza are now facing the possibility of, again, being displaced.
Palestinians pick through the ruins in the aftermath of an Israeli strike on a displacement camp in Gaza City. Israel has been continuing its strikes on the city and the surrounding areas, prompting thousands of people to flee south. Earlier this week offered a moment of hope when Hamas said it would accept a new ceasefire proposal. But now that hope is looking dim. Israel says it is not interested in, quote, partial deals, and called for the release of all the hostages still being held by Hamas. Then came the news that Israel's defense minister has approved a plan to widen operations and seize Gaza City, which it believes is Hamas' main political and military stronghold. With Israeli tanks lining up on the border and tens of thousands of reservists being called up, Gazans are worried.
We try to be optimistic about the war ending, but suddenly we've lost hope. Any talk of a deal is no longer useful. Hamas agrees to a deal. Israel refuses, and vice versa. All we want is to be safe.
We thought there would be a truce, but waking up to the news that 60,000 soldiers are entering the Gaza Strip, this is very, very, very catastrophic news.
I'm not optimistic about the war ending. They will refuse as always. Every day we come here for food, but without receiving anything. Instead, they shoot at us.
While the ceasefire proposal has not been officially rejected, optimism, like many things here in Gaza, is in very short supply.
Well, our coverage continues now with our senior international correspondent, Fanny Facsar. She joins me from Jerusalem. Fanny, what does taking over Gaza City mean? I mean, what is the Israeli military planning to do?
Basically seizing, occupying more and more territory of the Gaza Strip, and most of it is already under Israel's control. But their latest push here, wanting to move into Gaza City and seizing what they consider the last biggest remaining stronghold of not only Hamas militants but various militant groups, is of course an escalation if really this offensive is going to move ahead. But everything, even though there is some cautious optimism here on the streets of Jerusalem among some people I've been speaking to today, that maybe there's still a ceasefire possible, what you see with regard to the statements made by Israeli authorities today by Israel's defense minister, it is to give a green light and to push into Gaza City. And obviously that means on the ground for the Palestinians, looking at the fact that around 1 million people are estimated to be in and around Gaza City. It's very densely populated. So the first question comes to your mind, how do you want to root out Hamas militants believed to be in a vast tunnel system without harming civilians? But this is exactly what Israel is keen to do, pushing ahead with their plan, calling up on 60,000 reservists that are supposed to report to duty by September 2nd. While some people still hope, maybe there's still about 10 days until that, maybe there's still time to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas militants, which would actually mean a 6-day truce. But really everything looks more towards escalation than looking towards winding down the planned military operations.
And funny, these 60,000 additional reservists, I mean, this is a major deployment that we're talking about. Does the IDF, does the Israeli military, does it enjoy broad public support for a measure like this? I mean, as we understand it, criticism of the war in Gaza is surging among Israelis.
It's really interesting to look at numbers, actually, because when I started covering post-October 7th, 2023, and looking at polls back then, it was about 10 to 20% of Israelis who opposed the start of the Gaza war and the ongoing Gaza war. Now we are speaking about 60 to 70% of Israelis who say this should end. And what I find quite interesting, these are not only ordinary citizens or relatives of hostages who are still being held captive in the Gaza Strip, but also people who used to serve in the Israeli military or in the Israeli Air Force who say this is an endless war. There's no clear strategy behind it. Let's end it. But this is just one part of the debate. The other one is among reservists who are to report to duty. Why is it that ultra-Orthodox Jews do not have to report, even though the Supreme Court has made a decision last year to make sure that this is fair and everybody needs to report? It's hardly implemented, or just to a very limited degree, that everyone, including ultra-Orthodox Jews, also need to report. So certainly it's going to be debated much more, playing out on the streets, more protests against the ongoing Gaza war. Only who in the Israeli government is going to listen, but because what nearly 2 years of the ongoing conflict has shown that there's more escalation and no prospect of actually a long-term ceasefire that then would move towards an end, a complete end of the Gaza war.
And Fanny, we want to move now from the Gaza Strip to the occupied West Bank. Israel's government today granted final approval for a controversial settlement in the occupied West Bank that effectively cuts the area in two. The E1 block backs up to the already large settlement of Mal Adunim, which, along with other settlements, is considered illegal under international law. Israeli settlement in E1 has been under consideration for more than 20 years, but was shelved following pressure from previous U.S. administrations. Palestinians and human rights groups say settlements in the area could end any hope for a future Palestinian state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to maintain indefinite control over the occupied West Bank, annexed East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. So, Fanny, I want to ask you, how is this being reported inside Israel? I mean, are Israelis being told that these settlements will be yet another hurdle to creating any potential future Palestinian state?
Well, if you watch the ordinary channels here in Israel, certainly not, but it's rather portrayed as something coming close to what's being called as a victory, especially amongst also, which echoes with far-right politicians in the far-right coalition government. We heard Mr. Smotrich, the finance minister, saying last week that going ahead with this E1 settlement plan basically buries the idea of any Palestinian state or the prospect of it. He even said there's nothing and no one to recognize last week. What we hear from Palestinians speaking in the occupied West Bank is that they're really concerned the more this ongoing Gaza war escalates, the less space they also have in the occupied West Bank. So we're not only speaking about an expansion of control in the Gaza Strip, but also in the occupied West Bank, which, as you just pointed out, is considered illegal under international law, something that's been also the opinion by the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. Regardless of that, it really looks like that the current government is very much emboldened and feels this is their momentum to press ahead with this controversial plan. And if really put in action, we're speaking here about thousands of apartments built in a place, in an area near Jerusalem, just east of Jerusalem, that is actually considered to be part of a future Palestinian state. And while we hear a lot of condemnation internationally, we did not hear any condemnation, any objection to this plan by Israel's biggest supporter, and that is the United States. Hence, what do you expect? Probably even more moves like that, more settlements, as long as Israel really feels on a political level that they can go ahead with that, and there's no one really stopping them from doing that.
Our senior international correspondent, Fanny, with the latest from Jerusalem for us tonight. Fanny, as always, thank you. Well, to further unpack the plans for a new settlement in the occupied West Bank, I'm joined now by Mustafa Barghouti. He's a Palestinian politician and civil rights activist. It's good to have you with us. Let me just get your reaction to news about this E1 block and what was decided today.
Well, it's drastic news. It tells you three things. First of all, that Israel is led by a fascist government that is absolutely extreme, and their whole plan is about eliminating the presence of the Palestinian people. Second, it tells you that Israel would not have dared to go that far in violating international law if it wasn't for the status of impunity they are enjoying. Thanks to the American support and thanks to the fact that European countries are abstaining from imposing any sanctions on Israel. Third, this act means the final blow to the whole idea of two-state solution or peace based on two-state solution.
Why do you say that? Mr. Barghouti, why do you say this is the final blow to the two-state solution?
Because this settlement will simply cut the West Bank, shatter it into two pieces without any kind of contiguity. You can't have a Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza if West Bank has no contiguity of its parts. Second, because this act will isolate Jerusalem, which should become the capital of the Palestinian state. It will isolate it completely from the rest of the occupied West Bank. And finally, this act will displace thousands more of Palestinian people and destroy many Palestinian communities in the vicinity, in the area, making these people refugees again. So if you put that all together, this, of course, undermines completely the possibility for a Palestinian state. But one more factor,
yes,
it's not just E1. This is not the tip of the iceberg, because you can see settlements expanding, especially during the last 2 years, everywhere in the West Bank. And there is we are already cut and into pieces of ghettos that are separated from each other by 1,000 Israeli military checkpoints, by gates that make many Palestinian villages and communities as small prisons. And we are unable to have joint economic life. We are unable to have proper educational system. We cannot even provide healthcare in a free manner because of the Israeli settlements and the Israeli control of major main roads. The West Bank is the only area in the whole world where you have not only segregated communities, but also segregated roads. Highways are exclusive for Jewish Israelis.
Well, what about the Palestinian Authority, and what about the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas? Has there been reaction coming from that corner?
Unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority has been disabled to a large extent by Israel, which is, by the way, confiscating most of its resources, tax revenue that should run the authority. Up till now, Israel is withholding more than $2.5 billion of the Palestinian tax revenue. But more than that, the Palestinian Authority has been stripped from all its authorities. The Israeli settlement building is happening not only in Area C, but also in Area B. And the Israeli army invades even Area A and destroys houses like they have done to 3 refugee camps in Jenin and in Karim.
Well,
so you are talking practically about an authority without authority.
Mr. Barghouti, why do you think, though, the approval came now? How do you explain the timing of this?
Because, as I said, Israel is led by a fascist government, which thinks now is the time to decisively end the Palestinian presence here. Their plan in Gaza is a total ethnic cleansing of 2.2 million people. And this is the Israeli solution to the fact that there are 7.3 million Palestinians on the land of historic Palestine versus 7.1 million Jewish people, regardless of the fact that 7.5 million Palestinians are refugees in other countries. And Israel now does not want to accept two-state solution, does not want to accept one democratic state solution. So their solution is ethnic cleansing. And
but what about if it changes?
Because they have the American support,
What about if it changes, though, in the future? If there were to be a move for a two-state solution, isn't it possible that these settlements, just like the E1 that we're talking about, that those settlements could be removed, that we could move back to something closer to the 1967 borders?
They should be removed if you want to have a Palestinian state. You can't have a Palestinian state with all these settlements.
But in theory, it's possible, though. Would you agree?
It's not, it's very difficult because now you are talking already about 800,000 Israeli illegal settlers settling in the West Bank. And with the new plans, this number will become 1 million. So in reality, maybe the only alternative we will have is to have a one democratic state with equal rights for everybody, which means abolishing apartheid and abolishing the Israeli racist discriminatory law, which says that the right of self-determination on the land of historic Palestine is exclusive for Jewish people. This idea of Jewish supremacy is the thing that is feeding anti-Semitism. Well, and the reality is that Netanyahu is the biggest advocate of anti-Semitism because of his behavior.
What would you say this evening is more likely, in your opinion, a two-state solution or a one-state solution?
At this moment, we are facing existential threat as Palestinian people. The biggest risk today is ethnic cleansing of our people in Gaza first and then in the West Bank. That's the threat we have to face. And then if we manage to stop it, and we will not be able to stop it unless the international community decides to apply the same rules they have applied to Russia, which is impose sanctions on Israel to stop this violation of international law.
Mustafa Barghouti, as always, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more, I want to cross over now to journalist Karim El-Gawhary. He joins us from Cairo in Egypt. Karim, good to see you. Tell us, for people who may not be following this very closely, what does taking over Gaza City exactly mean?
Well, in a way, the operation is already ongoing as the Israeli army is operating already in 4 different areas in Gaza City and the neighboring Jabalia refugee camp as we speak, preparing this bigger offensive that is announced there. People describe the situation that right now they're experiencing the most intensive bombardments and military operations in Gaza City yet. More and more people are getting phone calls by the Israeli army being told to leave the area. The majority of people, though, decide not to leave far away, but to stay close. Most of them right now are escaping to the western parts of Gaza City instead of moving further south and to the central strip because they don't trust any longer the so-called Israeli safe zones that were designated for them, and because they are permanently attacked too. So if you call people today in Gaza in the last days, there's really a sense of desperation in Gaza City. Some people are really saying on the phone, let's just get it all over with.
Yeah, I mean, that's a comment in itself, isn't it? And you've got Israel's military also announcing today that it's calling up 60,000 reservists. I mean, this looks like an escalatory move, but what exactly are these 60,000 reservists? What are they being called up for?
Well, that basically shows that, of course, Netanyahu's plan is to widen the operation in and around Gaza City. It's not only that the army is supposed to move in, but there's also already ongoing an operation of blowing up and bulldozing whole areas around Gaza City to make it uninhabitable. Many Palestinians believe that this follows an already announced plan to concentrate them in the south while the Israeli army remains having security control over the rest of the Gaza Strip and displacing people from there. I mean, you don't call 60,000 reservists in just for a short-term military operation.
And there's another big announcement. It's the plan of a new settlement in the occupied West Bank, the so-called E1 area. Why is this particular settlement, why is it so controversial now?
Well, the reason that's controversial, it's not only that there's 3,400 new settlement units on Palestinian lands, but the decisive thing here is geography and location. If this project is finished, it will basically cut the West Bank into 2 separate parts. And in addition, it would also isolate the Palestinian East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. In other words, if this really is going to be executed and finished, it would mean basically the death sentence for any independent Palestinian state and a 2-state solution, because there's practically no continuous territory left for a Palestinian state then.
And Karim, we know that plans for this settlement, they have been in the works for a long time, but due to international pressure, Israel had always held off on them. So why is Israel pushing through with it now?
Well, if you listen to the words of the two most right-wing ministers in Netanyahu's government, Finance Minister Smotrich and Security Minister Ben-Gvir, they're very, very clear about that. They say now, as many states internationally are already recognized the Palestinian states or are about to recognize a Palestinian state, they say we have to rush to basically create a situation where there's nothing left to be recognized.
And if we zoom out and look at the wider Middle East, I mean, what has been reaction from other countries to what is going on?
Well, especially the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, are right now extremely disillusioned. They tried to broker a ceasefire of 60 days in exchange for releasing half of the Israeli hostages in exchange for a Palestinian prisoner release, just as basically as the Americans suggested to them. Only to see that yesterday or 2 days ago, Hamas accepted the deal while there was no answer from Netanyahu to it. The same Netanyahu that is calling in now 60,000 reservists in order to basically continue the war.
Journalist Karim El-Gawhary with the latest from Cairo. Karim, as always, thank you.
You're welcome.